It was a warm, late afternoon when a mother and her young daughter decided to take a short walk through their neighborhood park. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Children laughed in the distance, and the faint sound of a dog barking made the neighborhood feel alive and ordinary. The kind of day that felt safe and calm. The mother walked just a few steps ahead, glancing over her shoulder to make sure her daughter was keeping up. The little girl, full of energy and curiosity, ran ahead a few steps before pausing to watch a butterfly flit across the grass. The mother smiled, trying to soak in the simple joy of the moment. She felt proud of her daughter, who always had a way of noticing the little wonders that adults often missed. But beneath the calm, there was always a hint of worry. A mother never stops thinking about keeping her child safe. As they followed the path toward the edge of the park, the faint rumble of motorcycles grew louder. At first it was just a distant hum, the kind of sound that could easily be ignored. But soon, the sound became more distinct and closer, carrying with it an unfamiliar energy that made the mother instinctively tighten her grip on her daughter's hand. She didn't know why, but something about the sound made her alert. She looked up and saw a group of bikers approaching, riding in a tight formation. They were wearing dark leather jackets and helmets, and the motorcycles gleamed under the fading sunlight. The mother took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. She told herself it was just a group of riders passing through, maybe heading home after a long ride. She squeezed her daughter's hand gently, silently reminding herself to stay composed. But as the motorcycles drew nearer, she noticed the way the riders were looking at them. Their eyes, even through their helmets, seemed fixed, and their body language carried a sense of intent that the mother couldn't ignore. The daughter, sensing her mother's unease, looked up and asked if everything was okay. The mother smiled, trying to hide her anxiety. "Yes, sweetie, everything's fine," she said, her voice steady, even as her heart beat a little faster. She wanted to protect her daughter from fear, to shield her from any sense of danger, even if she couldn't completely shake it herself. The bikers slowed down as they approached, forming a semicircle around the path. The mother could now see that there were at least 6 of them, all wearing dark sunglasses and heavy boots, with the unmistakable air of people used to getting attention wherever they went. The roar of their motorcycles had faded, replaced by a tense silence that seemed heavier than the quiet of the park had been moments before. The mother instinctively moved slightly in front of her daughter. Putting herself between the bikers and the little girl, one of the bikers leaned slightly off his motorcycle, his hand resting casually on the handlebars. His presence was imposing, and his gaze seemed to scan them with a mixture of curiosity and challenge. The mother felt a shiver run down her spine. She had faced uncomfortable situations before, but there was something different about this group, something that made her pulse quicken. She reminded herself to stay calm, to not let fear take over. She had always believed that calmness could defuse tension, that showing confidence, even if she didn't feel it fully, could influence the way others reacted. Her daughter, standing close behind her, looked up with wide eyes, sensing the seriousness of the moment. The mother knelt slightly to meet her daughter's gaze, giving a reassuring smile. "Stay close to me, okay?" she whispered. The bikers, however, didn't seem interested in moving along. They slowed their pace, gliding beside the mother and daughter as if testing them. One of them called out, a voice muffled slightly by the helmet, but still loud enough to carry. The words were teasing, almost mocking, but the tone was heavy with aggression. The mother's heart sank, realizing that this was no longer a casual encounter. These were people who were deliberately trying to intimidate her and her daughter. She straightened, taking a deep breath and reminding herself that showing fear could make the situation worse. Her voice, calm but firm, responded to the biker. "Please, we're just walking home. Could you give us some space?" she said. The words were polite, but they carried an edge of authority. She wanted to set boundaries, to communicate that they were not to be harassed. The bikers laughed, a low rumbling sound that echoed off the trees lining the path. One of them nudged another with his elbow, and they seemed to find amusement in the mother's polite defiance. The mother felt a wave of fear and frustration. She had hoped that courtesy would be enough. but the bikers seemed to enjoy testing her patience, testing her courage. Her daughter, watching closely, began to feel the tension too. She had never seen her mother so focused, so determined to protect her. The little girl's fear was there, but it was mixed with a growing sense of admiration. She understood, even at her young age, that her mother was trying to handle a situation that could easily spiral out of control. She held on to her mother's hand tightly, willing herself to be brave. The bikers, sensing that the mother was not panicking, exchanged glances. It was clear that they hadn't expected resistance, and this seemed to irritate them. The mother noticed the subtle changes in their posture, the way their laughter faltered for a moment. She realized that her calmness had made them reconsider their approach, at least slightly. Trying to diffuse the tension, she spoke again, keeping her voice steady. "We don't want any trouble. We're just trying to get home," she said. She made sure her words were clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding. The mother understood the delicate balance she needed to maintain, firm enough to show she wouldn't be intimidated, gentle enough to avoid provoking unnecessary aggression. The daughter, sensing her mother's strategy, stayed close and kept her eyes on the bikers. She noticed small details, the way one biker's jaw tightened, the way another shifted uneasily on his motorcycle. She began to understand that people's actions often spoke louder than their words, that observing carefully could give clues about how to respond. It was a small lesson in awareness that she would remember for the rest of her life. The mother continued walking slowly, keeping a steady pace that would allow them to stay together and maintain control of the situation. Every step felt deliberate, measured, a quiet assertion that they were not afraid. The bikers followed, but not as aggressively as before. There was a subtle change in the energy, a shift that the mother felt even without knowing exactly why. Her calmness, her refusal to panic, seemed to have an effect as they approached the edge of the park. The path widened slightly, giving them a bit more space. The mother used the opportunity to glance around, looking for any potential escape routes or places where they could seek help if needed. She noticed a few neighbors watching from a distance, some waving awkwardly. Their presence gave her a small sense of relief. She wasn't completely alone. The bikers, however, were still close enough to make the mother wary. She could feel the tension lingering in the air, a reminder that the situation was still unpredictable. She continued speaking softly to her daughter, keeping her focused. "We're almost home. Just a little further," she said. Her words were meant to calm, but also to reinforce a sense of safety and progress. Her daughter, though scared, began to mirror her mother's composure. She walked with her shoulders slightly back, her head held high, even as her small hand remained tightly clasped in her mother's. It was a subtle shift, but one that made the mother's heart swell with pride. She realized that courage could be contagious, that her calm determination was helping her daughter face the moment with more confidence than she thought possible. The bikers, still watching them closely, seemed to sense that their intimidation was not working as they had hoped. One of them muttered something under his breath, and the others exchanged glances. The mother noticed the flicker of doubt in their eyes. She didn't know if they would leave peacefully, but she knew that her steady demeanor was buying them time, creating a window for a safe resolution. Step by step, they moved closer to the street that led to their home. The mother maintained her calm, focusing on the path ahead rather than the bikers flanking them. She kept her daughter close, making sure that every movement was deliberate and safe. The daughter, in turn, felt a mix of fear and empowerment, understanding that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. By the time they reached the corner, where the park ended and the quiet streets began, the bikers had slowed their pace noticeably. The mother could feel the shift in the air, a subtle acknowledgement that their aggressive approach was no longer as effective. She stayed alert, knowing that the situation was not yet over, but she allowed herself a small sense of relief. They had made it through the park without incident, thanks to calmness, observation, and careful action, as they turned onto their street. The mother finally allowed herself a deep breath. She glanced at her daughter, whose eyes were still wide but filled with a new sense of understanding. The walk through the park had been more than just a simple stroll. It had been a lesson in courage, awareness, and the power of composure in the face of uncertainty. The mother knew that the next steps, whatever they would be, could be handled with the same care and calmness that had carried them this far. The moment the mother and her daughter stepped onto the quieter street, the atmosphere felt slightly less tense, but the memory of the biker's aggressive presence lingered like a shadow. The mother knew better than to relax completely. She could still hear the faint hum of the motorcycles behind them, the occasional scrape of a boot against the asphalt. And she sensed the bikers were still close, watching, testing, waiting for a reaction. She kept her pace steady, measured, never showing fear, even as her heart continued to race. Her daughter stayed close, mirroring her mother's careful steps. The little girl's hand remained firmly in hers, and the mother could feel the tight grip, a small but powerful reminder of trust and connection. They moved slowly, each step deliberate, as if by controlling their movements they could influence the energy around them. The daughter glanced sideways at the bikers and then quickly focused on the path ahead. Clearly realizing the importance of composure, the mother thought about what to say, trying to keep her words calm and neutral. She whispered softly, "Just keep walking, stay with me, and don't say anything unless I ask." The daughter nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. At that moment, words could either escalate the tension or help de-escalate it, and the mother wanted to make sure they chose the latter. One of the bikers, noticeably taller than the others, nudged a friend and called out something loud enough for them to hear. The words weren't kind. They carried a mocking tone, a test of control. The mother could see the little flicker of amusement in the biker's eyes. It's the kind that comes from thinking you have the upper hand. But she didn't respond aggressively or defensively. Instead, she kept walking, her body language calm, grounded, and unshakable. Her daughter, noticing the change in tone, felt a spike of fear, but also a spark of courage. She looked up at her mother, who gave her a reassuring nod. And that silent gesture seemed to transfer some of the mother's calm strength to her. The little girl straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin slightly, and walked with quiet determination. The mother was proud, realizing that her example was already teaching her daughter a powerful lesson about facing challenges with composure. The bikers circled them slightly, keeping pace, but not yet advancing aggressively. The mother sensed that they were trying to gauge the mother and daughter to see how they would react. She thought carefully about every step, every movement, every breath. She reminded herself that panic could make the situation worse and that they needed to show calm confidence instead. Almost there. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, nodding toward the street corner where a few houses were visible. The thought of being closer to familiar surroundings gave her a small boost of reassurance. She could see a porch light in the distance, a familiar symbol of safety and home, and that small visual anchor helped her maintain focus. The biker's laughter broke the silence again, but this time it sounded slightly different, less certain, less assured. The mother noticed subtle shifts, a hesitant glance, a tightened jaw, a hand brushing against a motorcycle seat almost unconsciously. Even small things like that could reveal the biker's mental state, and she observed carefully, noting every detail. Her daughter, learning from her mother, started noticing those details too. Her young mind absorbing lessons in awareness and reading people as they walked. The mother subtly adjusted their path to stay closer to the side of the street with better visibility. She wanted to make sure they could see potential exits or help if needed. Every decision was deliberate, small but meaningful, like pieces of a puzzle that would ensure their safety. She whispered to her daughter again, "Stay alert, but don't look scared." "Keep your head up," daughter nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility in her small hands, but also realizing that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. She started to mirror her mother's calm breathing, slow and steady, which helped her manage the nervous fluttering in her stomach. The mother noticed the change and felt a quiet sense of relief. They were facing the situation together, united. One of the bikers moved slightly ahead, leaning forward on his motorcycle, his eyes fixed on them. The mother recognized the classic behavior of someone trying to assert dominance. She didn't flinch. Instead, she focused on her daughter, using her presence as a shield, showing that they weren't going to react with panic or anger. Her body language was strong and composed, signaling confidence without confrontation. The daughter, emboldened by her mother's stance, took a small, quiet step forward. She could feel the weight of her own courage, a sensation she had never experienced so strongly before. She glanced briefly at the bikers, and her gaze was calm, steady, and unafraid. The mother noticed and gave a subtle nod of approval. It was a moment of silent communication, a shared understanding that they were in this together, and that fear would not control them. The bikers, sensing the shift, exchanged quick glances. Their initial confidence seemed to falter. One of them muttered under his breath, and another kicked the ground lightly with his boot. The energy of aggression that had been so strong moments ago was now mixed with uncertainty. The mother could feel the change, but she knew better than to assume it meant the situation was over. Vigilance was still necessary. They continued down the street. The mother could see a neighbor stepping outside, briefly pausing on the porch to watch. The presence of another person gave her a sense of reassurance, a subtle signal that they weren't completely isolated. She whispered to her daughter, "We're almost safe. Just a little further." Her words were meant to encourage, but also to maintain focus. A reminder that safety was close but not yet guaranteed. The daughter tightened her grip on her mother's hand, feeling a surge of protective energy. She realized that even though she was small, her presence mattered. Her calmness and focus could influence the energy around them. She started walking with quiet determination, her steps confident and deliberate, as if declaring that they would not be intimidated. The bikers, still observing, seemed to pick up on this subtle but powerful change. One of them let out a frustrated sound, and another adjusted his position on the motorcycle as if reconsidering his approach. The mother sensed that their strategy of intimidation was losing effectiveness. Her calm composure and her daughter's quiet courage had shifted the balance. Despite the progress, the mother remained focused. She knew that the bikers' intentions could still be unpredictable. She carefully guided her daughter, keeping their movements slow and deliberate, maintaining the psychological upper hand without provoking confrontation. Every step was a silent assertion of control and composure, a demonstration that they would not be easily intimidated as they approached the final turn that would lead them closer to their home. The mother could feel her daughter's small hand trembling slightly. She squeezed it gently, reassuring her without breaking the calm rhythm. "Almost there," she whispered again. "You're doing so well." The daughter, encouraged by her mother's words, felt a renewed sense of confidence. She realized that courage wasn't about loud declarations or dramatic gestures. It was about presence, awareness, and the quiet strength to face fear without letting it dominate you. She straightened her back, held her head high, and continued walking with deliberate steps. The bikers, sensing the mother and daughter's unyielding calm, started to slow their pace. Their aggressive energy was dampened, replaced with uncertainty. The mother noticed subtle signs of hesitation in their movements. A brief pause in conversation and glances exchanged that revealed doubt. She stayed vigilant, knowing that they still needed to reach home safely. But she allowed herself to recognize that they were gaining control of the situation by the time they reached the intersection near their house. The mother could feel the tension beginning to ease. She knew that they were close to safety, and she could see the familiar streetlights and houses that marked the threshold of home. Her daughter's steps matched hers, steady and confident, a testament to the lessons she had learned in those tense moments. Finally, they turned the corner and stepped onto their own street. The mother felt a deep sense of relief, tempered by the awareness that courage and composure had carried them through a moment of real tension. She glanced at her daughter, whose eyes reflected a mixture of fear, pride, and newfound understanding. They had faced an intimidating situation together and emerged stronger, bonded, and wiser. The experience would remain with them forever, a lesson in courage, awareness, and the quiet power of standing firm even when others try to provoke fear. The street was quieter now, but the mother could still feel the presence of the bikers lingering behind them. Their earlier aggression had softened slightly, but she knew better than to assume it was completely gone. Every step had to be deliberate, every movement measured. She kept her daughter close, holding her small hand firmly as they walked with careful composure. The little girl looked up at her mother with wide eyes, sensing that the moment was critical. Her mother's calm demeanor had become a quiet anchor, giving her courage even as fear still hummed in the back of her mind. The bikers had slowed their pace, and the mother noticed a subtle shift in their energy. They were no longer leaning forward aggressively or shouting, but they were still circling, observing, waiting for a reaction. It was clear they hadn't expected such steady composure, especially from a child. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, "Stay close. Don't say anything unless I ask. Just watch and listen." The little girl nodded. Understanding that sometimes silence could be as powerful as words, the tension lingered as the bikers drew nearer, and the mother felt a mixture of fear and resolve. She had faced difficult situations before, but something about this group, their sheer presence and unpredictable energy, made her feel the weight of responsibility even more intensely. She took a deep breath, centering herself, focusing on the steps ahead. Her daughter followed her lead, matching her pace, holding her head high, and breathing slowly. Suddenly, one of the bikers leaned slightly forward, a mocking grin visible through the helmet's visor. He made a comment, loud enough for them to hear, a teasing remark meant to provoke fear. The mother didn't flinch. She looked directly at him, calm and steady, showing no sign of intimidation. Her eyes met his with quiet confidence, and in that moment, it was clear she wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. The little girl, observing the exchange, felt a spark of something she hadn't felt before: courage. She realized that her mother's calm strength was powerful, that it was influencing not just her own response, but the energy around them. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment, and then stepped slightly forward. Her voice, clear and surprisingly firm, broke the tension. "Why are you trying to scare us?" she asked, looking each biker in the eye. There was no tremor in her voice, only a directness that made the bikers pause. The words were simple, innocent in their form, but they carried an unexpected power. It was the voice of a child who was not afraid to question injustice, who could see the absurdity of aggression and call it out plainly. The bikers froze. For a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. They hadn't expected a child to confront them so directly, to speak with such clarity and confidence. The mother felt a mix of surprise and pride. Her daughter had taken a risk, but in doing so had introduced a new dynamic. The aggression that had once dominated the encounter was now met with clarity and courage, and the bikers were forced to reconsider their stance. One of the bikers muttered something under his breath, a low sound that was part confusion, part frustration. Another shifted slightly on his motorcycle, and the leader's grip on the handlebars tightened for just a moment. The little girl's words, simple as they were, had disrupted the balance of power. The mother noticed the subtle signs: hesitation, small gestures of doubt, and the faint lowering of aggressive postures. They were reconsidering. The daughter continued, finding her voice strengthened by the effect it had already had. "We're not afraid, and you don't have to be either," she said. "You can be strong without hurting people." Her words were small, but filled with honesty, a reflection of the wisdom that sometimes comes from simplicity. The mother watched, amazed at the clarity and bravery her child displayed. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a lesson in courage, morality, and the quiet power of speaking truth. The bikers shifted uneasily. It was clear that her words had landed in a way they hadn't anticipated. Aggression had lost its grip, replaced by uncertainty. One of them looked away, another scratched the back of his neck. The group exchanged glances, as if silently acknowledging that they had misjudged the situation. The mother felt a sense of relief, though she remained vigilant. Courage and calm had given them the upper hand. But the encounter was not yet over. The mother whispered to her daughter, keeping her voice steady, "You're doing wonderfully. Just keep being honest and calm." The little girl nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of pride and determination. She realized that her words had power, that even in the face of intimidation, she could influence the outcome. It was a revelation that would stay with her forever. The bikers continued to circle, slower now. Their energy noticeably changed. The earlier laughter and teasing were gone, replaced by silence and cautious observation. The mother and daughter kept walking, maintaining their composed pace, showing that they were not going to react to fear or threats. The little girl's confidence had shifted the mood completely, turning what had been an intimidating confrontation into a moment of reflection. Another biker, perhaps the most imposing of the group, finally spoke, but the words were quieter, lacking the mockery of before. "You're brave," he said, almost as if surprised by the admission. The mother's heart skipped a beat. She understood that sometimes recognition, even from an unexpected source, could mark a turning point. Her daughter had reached them not with anger or defiance, but with honesty and courage, and it had changed the energy entirely. The little girl felt a surge of hope. She realized that speaking her truth could have an effect, that even those who seemed threatening could respond to sincerity and courage. She looked directly at the bikers and repeated, "You don't have to scare anyone to be important." Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet conviction. The bikers seemed to hesitate, processing the words. Their aggressive stance softened further, and for the first time, the mother saw genuine contemplation in their eyes. They had approached with one intention, but the encounter had shifted. The balance of power was no longer in intimidation. It was in honesty and courage. In the quiet strength of a mother and her child, the mother kept walking, holding her daughter's hand firmly but gently, showing solidarity and support. She knew that the moment had been pivotal, that her daughter's courage had changed the course of the encounter. She felt a swell of pride and gratitude, realizing that bravery often comes in unexpected forms and from unexpected people. As they neared the final stretch toward their street, the bikers slowed even more. The leader looked at the group, and for a brief moment, there was a sense of unspoken agreement. They weren't leaving in defeat, but they were no longer pushing aggression. The encounter had shifted from tension to reflection, from intimidation to consideration. The mother whispered to her daughter, "You've done incredibly well. Just a few more steps." The little girl nodded, her confidence solidifying with every word of encouragement and every calm step forward. She had discovered a new kind of strength, one that came not from physical presence, but from courage, honesty, and the quiet force of words. The bikers, now fully observing rather than intimidating, began to slow their motorcycles further, as if the encounter had reached an unspoken conclusion. The mother felt relief, knowing that her calm composure and her daughter's brave words had shifted the energy completely. The little girl had faced fear head-on, and had done so with clarity and integrity. And it had worked. By the time they reached the corner leading to their street, the mother could see familiar sight streetlights, houses, and the small comforts of home. The little girl's steps were confident and deliberate, a mirror of her inner transformation. She had faced fear, spoken her truth, and influenced those who had initially intended to intimidate them. The mother's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. The encounter had been tense, uncertain, and frightening, but it had also been a lesson in courage, resilience, and the power of words. The mother and daughter had emerged not only safe, but stronger, bonded, and wiser. The bikers, once a symbol of aggression, had been met with honesty, calm, and courage. And the balance had shifted completely. The mother knew that this moment would remain with them forever, a testament to the quiet strength that comes from bravery, presence, and integrity. The quiet of the streets seemed to stretch endlessly as the mother and her daughter continued walking, their steps deliberate and calm. The earlier tension had begun to shift after the little girl had spoken, her words piercing the aggressive energy of the bikers and planting doubt where certainty once stood. The mother kept a steady pace, her eyes scanning their surroundings while her daughter's hand remained tightly clasped in hers. Both of them had learned that composure and courage could change the course of events. But vigilance was still crucial. The bikers had slowed significantly, their engines now a soft rumble rather than a roar. The group no longer rode with the same threatening posture, and the leader seemed to be silently questioning their approach. The mother noticed small signs, a hand loosening on a handlebar, a subtle tilt of the head, glances exchanged among the riders that spoke volumes about their uncertainty. The atmosphere had changed from one of intimidation to hesitation, and the mother knew that this was the turning point where they could take control of their own safety. Her daughter, sensing the shift, felt a surge of confidence. She had seen the effect her words could have, and it empowered her to keep moving with calm determination. She walked with her head held high, shoulders straight, and eyes focused forward. Showing a quiet strength that matched her mother's, the mother could feel her pride swelling. Knowing that her guidance and example had nurtured this courage in her child, every step they took together reinforced their bond and their ability to face fear without panic. The mother spoke softly so only her daughter could hear. "We're doing so well. Stay steady and keep walking with confidence." The daughter nodded, feeling reassured by the gentle encouragement. She realized that fear could be met with calm, that aggression could be countered with composure, and that courage often spoke louder than anger. The realization gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt before, and it made the remaining distance feel manageable. The bikers, though still nearby, seemed to be reconsidering their actions. One of them muttered something quietly to another, their laughter gone, replaced by an uncertain silence. The mother could feel the subtle power of words, presence, and calmness shaping the situation. Aggression no longer dominated. Clarity and courage had taken its place. She walked with deliberate confidence, ensuring that they maintained a pace and posture that reinforced their newfound advantage. The daughter's small hand in hers reminded the mother of the stakes, the responsibility she carried. She realized that bravery could be contagious, that her own calmness and careful guidance were giving her child the strength to act thoughtfully and courageously. The girl's eyes, wide and alert, reflected a combination of fear, awareness, and a growing sense of self-assurance. It was a quiet human moment, filled with trust and mutual reliance. One of the bikers, the leader, spoke again, this time in a voice low and reflective. "You're brave," he said, almost as a confession. The mother felt a mixture of relief and pride. The acknowledgement, coming from someone who had approached them with intimidation, confirmed that the dynamic had changed. Her daughter had confronted fear with truth, honesty, and composure, and it had shifted the energy entirely. The mother knew that this moment would be remembered by all of them. The little girl, encouraged by the effect of her words and presence, continued to walk steadily. She realized that courage was not about loud voices or physical strength. It was about presence, awareness, and the quiet force of honesty. She looked at the bikers calmly, her gaze steady, and spoke again in a soft but firm tone. "You don't have to be mean to feel strong. You are already strong because you are here." The words, simple yet powerful, had a visible effect on the group. Hesitation grew where certainty once was, and the aggressive energy dissipated further. The mother watched carefully, guiding her daughter with subtle gestures and gentle encouragement. She understood that the encounter had become a lesson in courage and human connection, showing that fear and intimidation could be countered by presence, calm, and thoughtful words. Every step forward reinforced their confidence and unity, and it created an invisible shield that made the bikers reconsider their intentions as they neared the intersection that led to their home. The mother noticed the change in the bikers' demeanor. The leader now rode slightly behind the rest, a subtle sign that he was reassessing the situation. The others followed, slower and less coordinated than before. The mother felt a small sense of relief, but remained cautious. She knew that the encounter was not over until they were safely inside their neighborhood. The daughter, feeling the shift, began to understand the impact of her presence and words. She had confronted fear directly with clarity and honesty, and it had transformed the encounter. She realized that she had agency, that her courage mattered, and that she could influence outcomes without aggression or anger. It was a powerful revelation, and it strengthened her resolve to remain calm and confident. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, keeping her voice steady and reassuring. "Almost there. Stay strong and keep walking with confidence." The little girl nodded, her steps measured and deliberate. She matched her mother's pace, her head held high, and her eyes focused forward. They were moving through the final stretch together. A team strengthened by courage and mutual trust, the bikers, sensing the shift, began to slow even further. The aggressive energy that had once surrounded them was nearly gone, replaced by contemplation and uncertainty. The mother kept her attention on their posture and movement, ensuring that they maintained control of their own actions. The little girl mirrored her composure, reinforcing the sense of calm and confidence that surrounded them by the time they reached the corner, leading directly to their street. The mother could see the familiar lights of home, a comforting sight that marked the boundary of safety. The little girl's steps were steady and confident, reflecting the inner strength she had discovered. She had faced fear and aggression, and had done so with courage, honesty, and calm. And it had transformed the encounter completely. The mother felt a deep sense of relief as they turned onto their street. She kept her daughter close, guiding her with gentle hands and quiet encouragement. The bikers, now fully behind them, had ceased their attempts at intimidation. The encounter had been reshaped by presence, composure, and the power of words spoken with clarity and courage. As they walked the final steps to their home, the mother reflected on the events that had unfolded. They had faced a situation that could have been frightening and dangerous, yet they had navigated it with calm, courage, and thoughtful action. The daughter had spoken truth with honesty and confidence, shifting the energy of the encounter and showing that courage comes in many forms. The mother's guidance, composure, and steady presence had provided a foundation for that bravery to emerge. The little girl, holding her mother's hand tightly, felt a sense of empowerment she had never experienced before. She had discovered that words, presence, and courage could influence situations in profound ways. The encounter had been a lesson in bravery, awareness, and human connection, and it had changed them both in ways they would carry forever. Finally, they reached their home, the familiar door and porch light offering comfort and safety. The mother and daughter shared a quiet, unspoken understanding. They had faced fear together, emerged stronger, and learned the true power of composure, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from unity. The bikers had left them physically unharmed, but the encounter had left an indelible mark, a reminder that bravery, presence, and honesty could transform even the most intimidating moments into lessons of resilience and human strength. The final steps toward home felt surreal to the mother and her daughter. The streetlights illuminated the familiar path, casting soft pools of light over the pavement. Every sound of the night, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional rustle of leaves, seemed magnified after the tense encounter with the bikers. The mother held her daughter's hand firmly, feeling the small, determined grip that had mirrored courage through every step. She took a deep breath, allowing herself to acknowledge the relief that had slowly started to build, even as her senses remained alert. The bikers were now fully behind them, their motorcycles quiet, engines idling softly. The earlier energy of aggression had dissipated almost entirely, replaced by a contemplative stillness. The mother felt a mixture of pride and cautious relief. She knew that nothing could replace vigilance, but she also realized that they had navigated the situation with calmness and courage that had shifted the balance entirely. Every step had been deliberate, every word and gesture carefully measured, and now the results were evident. Her daughter walked beside her, small shoulders straight, eyes wide with an awareness that was beyond her years. She had spoken with honesty and courage, confronting intimidation with words that were both simple and powerful. The mother had seen the shift in the bikers' demeanor, felt the change in the energy around them, and understood that this was a moment of transformation, not just for the encounter, but for her child as well. The girl had learned that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act thoughtfully in spite of it. As they approached their own street, the mother noticed familiar sights that had never seemed so comforting. The quiet houses, the soft glow of porch lights, the occasional neighbor walking a dog or stepping outside. Each of these small details added a sense of safety and reassurance. The mother whispered to her daughter, "We're almost home. Just a few more steps." Her voice was calm, gentle, but carried the weight of experience and reassurance. The little girl nodded, feeling the steadying effect of her mother's presence. The bikers, sensing that the encounter was nearing its conclusion, began to retreat slowly. Their motorcycles shifted into gear, engines humming softly, a subtle acknowledgement that their aggression had failed. The leader looked over his shoulder, meeting the mother's steady gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. There were no words, No confrontation, any the unspoken recognition that courage and composure had changed the course of events. The mother felt a profound sense of relief, knowing that her calm presence and her daughter's bravery had worked in tandem to protect them both. The daughter, sensing the shift, felt a new confidence welling up inside her. She realized that her words had mattered, that speaking truth with clarity and honesty could influence even those who had seemed most threatening. She understood that courage came in many forms, not just in bold gestures or loud voices, but in the quiet strength of conviction and the ability to stay composed under pressure. The mother noticed the glow of understanding in her daughter's eyes, and it filled her heart with pride as they reached the gate to their own property. The mother paused for a moment, letting the familiar surroundings sink in. She looked down at her daughter, whose small hand remained in hers, and felt an overwhelming sense of connection and gratitude. They had faced fear together, relied on each other, and emerged not only safe, but stronger. The encounter had been more than a confrontation. It had been a lesson in resilience, awareness, and the power of calm and courageous action. The daughter squeezed her mother's hand, silent acknowledgement of shared strength. "We did it," she whispered softly, her voice filled with wonder and a hint of triumph. The mother smiled, her own eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes, we did," she replied. "And we learned something very important about ourselves today." Inside their home, the mother guided her daughter gently, closing the door behind them and allowing the sense of safety to envelop them. The familiar sounds of their house, the soft hum of a fan, the gentle ticking of a clock, felt comforting after the tension of the evening. They sat together for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the experience settle into memory. The mother reflected on the journey, understanding that courage and calm could create a shield stronger than fear or aggression. The daughter, sitting close, looked up at her mother with wide eyes. "Do you think they will remember what I said?" she asked. There was genuine curiosity in her voice, a mix of hope and wonder. The mother smiled and nodded. "Yes, I think they will. Your words mattered. You reminded them that they didn't need to scare anyone to feel strong. That is something they won't forget easily." The mother and daughter spent the rest of the evening talking quietly about what had happened, reflecting on the lessons learned. They discussed bravery, composure, and the power of words spoken with honesty. The little girl realized that courage wasn't about never feeling afraid. It was about facing fear with calm, making thoughtful choices, and staying true to one's values even when the situation seemed overwhelming. The mother felt proud, knowing that her guidance had helped her child discover this strength within herself as the night deepened. The mother looked back on the events of the evening with a sense of awe. They had faced a real challenge, a moment of uncertainty and potential danger, and had navigated it with grace and courage. The bikers, once symbols of intimidation, had been met with calm, honesty, and composure. The encounter had not only preserved their safety, but it also transformed it into a lesson in human strength and connection. The mother realized that the experience would remain with them both, shaping their understanding of courage and resilience for years to come. The daughter, now calmer and more reflective, nestled close to her mother. She felt the warmth and safety of home, the reassurance of her mother's presence, and the quiet power of knowing that she had acted with courage when it mattered most. The events of the evening had shown her that fear could be met with calm, that words could influence even those who seemed most threatening, and that bravery came in many forms, often quiet and unassuming, yet immensely powerful in the days and weeks that followed. The mother and daughter would often recount the encounter, reflecting on the lessons learned. They understood that bravery was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, deliberate, and composed. They had faced fear together, and in doing so, had strengthened their bond and their understanding of the human capacity for courage. The bikers had left physically unharmed, but the experience had left an indelible mark, a reminder that presence, honesty, and courage could change even the most challenging situations. The mother often thought about the way her daughter had spoken, how her words had cut through intimidation and fear. She realized that courage could emerge from the youngest among us, that clarity and honesty could be more powerful than aggression, and that composure could shift the balance in unexpected ways. She felt gratitude for the shared experience, for the lessons learned, and for the quiet moments of connection that had allowed both of them to emerge stronger and wiser. The daughter, too, reflected on the experience with a new understanding of herself. She had faced a situation that had seemed overwhelming and had discovered that her voice mattered, that her presence could influence outcomes. And that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act thoughtfully despite it. The lessons of that night would stay with her forever, shaping her confidence, resilience, and understanding of human strength. The mother and daughter continued their lives, but the encounter remained a powerful memory. It reminded them both that courage could be found in calmness, that composure could influence even those who seemed most threatening, and that words spoken with honesty and conviction could shift energy in profound ways. The experience had been frightening, yes, but it had also been transformative, showing the quiet strength of presence, unity, and bravery in the face of uncertainty. In the end, the mother and daughter had not only navigated a tense encounter safely, but it also gained a profound understanding of human resilience. They had faced fear together, emerged stronger, and discovered the power of courage, composure, and honesty. The lesson was clear: bravery comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest, calmest, and most honest actions carry the greatest power. The memory of that night, filled with fear, courage, and triumph, would remain with them forever, a testament to the strength found in unity, presence, and human connection.